part of your Monday morning with me about some of the issues affecting you. I appreciate Mr. Davidson. Thank you for taking time for being here and inviting us to the company. I know we've worked together on a lot of issues, from tax inversions to energy increases to access to the Gulf and on and on. And right now we continue, energy states like ours, energy industries like ours are under attack in Washington, virtually like I've never seen before. And so this is a chance to talk about some of the big issues, but also to hear from you. We do a lot of town hall meetings. I live back home here, commute to work each week in Washington. I've done that. We have 2 little boys. I want them to grow up Texan, not Washingtonian or whatever that would be. We commute back and forth. In fact, in my miles commuting back and forth, I've now completed 3 round trips to the moon. I'm on my 4th back. I actually figured that out for a Boy Scout troop the other day, and I was so impressed by it, I now use that. So I apologize about that. But it allows me to do a lot of town hall meetings. And the importance of that is that, for me, it gives me a chance to hear from you. What I've learned over the years, you just can't be an expert on all issues. You just can't. And so you've got to make yourself accessible to hear about what's going on, and also so you hold yourself accountable to the people you work with. So, with your permission, I want to run through a quick PowerPoint about the economy and jobs, what's going on in Washington, and then, with your permission, Bob, we'll open it up and for questions and comments. Is that okay? Let's do this. Critical issues facing America today clearly are federal debt and the economy has to lead it. Almost 2/3 of young Americans believe that America's growing debt is a threat to national security. In fact, the head of our Joint Chiefs of Staff has said long term, the greatest threat to national security in America is this growing debt, on and on and on, because it weakens us. Second issue, obviously, the economy and jobs. 80% of Americans believe the economy remains in recession. The number who believe the future is very bleak is a little higher than that, as a matter of fact, and unfortunately for good reason. But we've got some of the solutions, and they're in the energy industry, allowing us to go back fully to work. The jobs that are created here, we've got some solutions here in our area for some of the dismal economic needs. Here's our future in spending, and the reason I spend a lot of time on how do we shrink the size of the federal government. The red is our debt going forward as a country. The green is our tax revenue. The debt going forward, you can tell it just is beginning to explode. We're not even there yet, and it's beginning to explode here. Let me put this in real terms, because I always think in terms of our boys. A child born today, their share of the federal debt today is about $46,000. So a baby born today owes Uncle Sam a new Lexus as their part of the debt. If government doesn't change its ways, by the time they're 13, they'll owe Uncle Sam a second Lexus. And by the time they're 22 and they're finishing college, ready to start their life, they will owe Uncle Sam a third. Now, the good news is young people don't actually buy luxury sedans from Uncle Sam. They pay the price differently. They pay it through a more sluggish economy. They pay it through higher taxes, higher interest rates. And so a young person, when they get ready to start their lives, there will be fewer jobs for them, and they'll keep less of what they earn. So the price of all this debt is very real. And just like in your company or in your home, you already know this. But when you're loaded up with debt, and all your money's going to credit cards, or all your money's going to debit cards, it drags you down. And there's no difference when that happens to a government as well. Here's what's interesting. A lot of people, you hear it in Washington, just say, look, we just need to raise taxes, and we can pay for all this debt. The truth of the matter is that over time in America, if you look right there, we're pretty consistent. With a few highs and lows during recessions, we generate about 19% of our economy for taxes. We do it just tradition, and we will. It'll bounce back to that here when and if the economy gets back on its feet. But as you can tell, you can never raise enough money to pay for all this spending. In fact, you could double everyone's taxes in this room, in this state, in America, and Washington would still be running a deficit. I mean, we're that far out of whack on spending. So our problem is not that we don't have enough revenue in Washington. The problem is the spending. And that's what you got to get a hold of. Here's our budget. I always put this in because it helps people to see sort of how your tax dollars are spent. And most people, the yellow pie fence, in my view, it's a large part of our budget, but is also, in my view, my number one constitutional responsibility is to keep you and this country safe. And that's why we literally put our hand on the Bible and swear our oath of office. So I'm strong pro-defense in a major way. So that's going to be a big part of the budget. This green slice here is what most of us think about for government. That's non-defense, so it isn't defense, but it's discretionary, which means each year Congress appropriates money. And it's what you think of air traffic control, roads and bridges, education, some of the healthcare issues, border control, security, issues like that are all within that green pie. And you'll often hear people talk about, well, we need to get the president, for example, propose, let's freeze non-defense discretionary spending. That's fine, but that's a small part of the budget. You can't get control of the spending there. This is what's interesting. This area right there is all on autopilot. Those are mandatory programs, which means if you're eligible, you hit the criteria, Congress doesn't appropriate it, it just gets to you. And it's a growing year. Social Security, obviously, amazing. These are important programs. Social Security, Medicare, for seniors, Medicaid, poor, the interest on their debt. These other mandatory programs like food stamps, unemployment, issues like that. And as you can tell, they're almost 2/3 of the budget. And that's what's driving our budget in the future. So the only way we can really get a grasp and a handle on our spending crisis is if we deal with the whole pie and not just pieces of it. What drives our debt going forward? This actually, three of our important programs, Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare, are our biggest drivers because so many people are getting older. We have 10,000 seniors a day signing up for Social Security and Medicare. 10,000 seniors each and every day signing up for Social Security and Medicare. So back to that chart one before, unless you're dealing with these three important programs, trying to get a fiscal handle on them, you won't balance the budget in our lifetime. And what's here, we actually right now, if you include the debt on the interest payments on our debt, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and our interest actually eat up every dollar of your tax dollar that goes to Washington. Already eating all of that up as we speak. And so we've got to address these issues. They're very important programs. You have to preserve them from those going forward, but all of them are shaky. Social Security, we're already running a deficit. Last year we borrowed $41 billion from the world to pay our seniors for Social Security. Medicare, it's about 13 years, 12, 13 years, and it doesn't go bankrupt, it just runs out of money. In Washington, they print it. But the bottom line is, it's a great program that's on really shaky financial ground. Choice of two futures. I always put this chart up because we don't have to accept that debt going forward. I mean, we have a choice. Earlier this year, we passed a budget that starts to bend the curve. And it can't do it immediately, but we can get a pretty good start here this year and next. The Path to Prosperity is a Republican budget. Basically, its goal is to get a handle on the spending, and then over time, to actually pay off our debt. Not to just stop, not to get to a balanced budget, because we still have all this debt, to actually start paying down our debt like a family would, like a business. And I think that's a critical distinction going forward because there's no other budget around that actually says, how do we get ourselves financially strong enough, that we can prosper as a country, because the two are definitely related. Next steps, obviously you've been following the debt crisis and that fiasco that occurred earlier this year, defiance overspending, a near government shutdown. The biggest challenge we've had this fall, we have three things coming up. One, the week November 14th, We'll be bringing the balanced budget constitutional amendment to the floor. We haven't brought one as a nation to the floor since 1986, I want to say, 87, thereabouts. It's been a long time. Passed the House, and it fell short by one vote in the Senate. And one of the questions you and I will have is, will a balanced budget create some discipline on the federal government? I'm just convinced taxpayers have to discipline their representatives. They actually have to put guardrails around spending, because I know how Washington works. I know how Austin works. You got to do it. So one of the questions is, do you believe the Constitution Amendment is important to put that discipline in place? I do. I'm a co-sponsor of this. That's one of the issues facing this here in a couple of weeks. There's another effort as well that I'm leading, which is, even with the balanced budget amendment, you got to put guardrails around federal spending in the future, because what Congress does today and what they promised to do in 5 years, oftentimes, big disconnect between the two. So how do you put guardrails around future Congresses so they can't spend, so they can't find an excuse to jump the guardrails, which is what has happened in the past. Graham Rudman, any other effort to sort of discipline the federal government, if it gets, they do it until it gets too hard. And then both parties will hold hands and they'll jump the goal. So we put together the Joint Economic Committee that I had for the Republicans in the House and Senate. We took two studies, an analysis we did. One, and we put them together into a bill. First, we looked at what our global competitors around the world who got themselves in financial trouble, what they did to get themselves out of financial problem and spur the economy at the same time. And what we learned is that 26 times, 9 of our key global competitors, they reduced their spending nationally. They lowered the amount of debt they owed, and guess what happened to the economy? It took off. Without the threat of higher taxes for families or businesses, consumer confidence was restored, business confidence was restored, and the economy started to take off. Companies like yours, only in a broader sense, started making investments to create jobs, and there's no substitute for it. So we put this MAP Act together that creates guardrails, and essentially, I'll run it real quick in a second. Here's the Constitutional Balanced Budget. In Congress, requires a 2/3 vote, so 270 in the House, 67 in the Senate. Right now, Republicans, all of whom support it, are 241, I believe, Republicans. And so it will require bipartisan support in Congress to send it to the states. 67 in the Senate will require at least 20 Democrats in the Senate to support it to send it to the states. So that's the first big obstacle. From there, the second obstacle is states. We have to have 3/4 of the vote, 38 states. You can tell here, Republican control of states, 26, and the red split are 8, nonpartisan 1. So even if the red, purple, and white all go for the constitutional amendment, you will need several states currently controlled by Democrats to support it. And it's been a long time since we've sent a constitutional amendment to the states. So that'll be the second battle going on for that. The MAP Act, really quickly on this. Basically, what we do is shrink the size of the federal government by 1/4 this decade, putting these guardrails around future government Congresses, and creating spending cuts if Congress tries to jump the guardrail. We sunset obsolete programs and agencies. You may have read about 2 months ago, Wall Street Journal had an article about Senator Tom Coburn had requested just a briefing, basically on how many programs duplicate each other. In education, 82 separate programs duplicate exactly the same function. Job training, 47. Urban aid, 8 bigger cities, we have 500 programs spread across I don't know how many different agencies. I guarantee you, if you're in a department in Noble Energy that duplicates another department, you're going to be nervous about your job. But in Washington, that's not the way it is. But we can't afford that duplication anymore. Honest budgeting by the White House, we put guardrails around the president, whoever that is, to make sure that they stay within the guardrails. We give the president a veto over frivolous spending, which should occur. Then finally, I end the threat of government shutdown forever. Because right now what happens at the end of every year, October, November, you read about a government shutdown. You know, there's big panic everywhere. They go to the brain. We end up spending more money to get out of the problem. Well, ours is the opposite. Ours puts in place a law that basically says Congress gridlocks and can't finish its appropriations, its budgeting process. Then government continues on, but it continues on at a smaller level, 10% smaller level. So when gridlock occurs, taxpayers benefit, not bigger government, taxpayers. So we're getting good response for the MAP Act. Here's one of the reasons we're focused on this. From 1981 to 2001, America actually shrunk its federal government as a percentage of the economy. It shrunk it from over 22% to around 18%. And guess what happened? We grew 37 million jobs. Not in the government sector, along Main Street. But ever since we started 9/11, we had a big spike in spending. Since then, with the stimulus and a lot of other programs, and we're now at record levels of spending, and we've lost 2.5 million jobs. Every time the federal government shrinks and we put it back in its box, Main Street tends to prosper. Those jobs occur. We're getting good support because we work with President Reagan's budget director, a number of the key people. We're getting good support for this MAP Act. AEI, major budget leader, most comprehensive role-seeing plan ever. That's quite a deal. We've got a lot of support in building support for it. We're working with the Super Committee to encourage them to incorporate this in what they do. The President's proposal you read about, and well, you saw perhaps his speech or comments the other day about a second stimulus effort. I'm not a fan of the first stimulus. I think it was a big failure. Right now, we were promised we spend $800 billion. The unemployment today would be at 6.5%. Well, missed the target just a bit. A lot of the money didn't go to private sector type infrastructure jobs. Others, it was wasted. We spent a lot in the government sector. And now, here we are, 2 years, more than 2 years after the stimulus. We actually have fewer jobs in America than when the stimulus began. We actually went backwards in jobs in America. And what's more troubling is that we have fewer people working as a part of the workforce than in the core of the century. Those aren't the sign business confidence down, consumer confidence down, business investments down. None of those are signs of a healthy economy. It's one thing if you have very small job growth 2 months after a recession ends. It's different today, 2.5 years after recession ended, that we're in this job. So we're in a pickle right now. The President's proposal is to continue, in fact, increase a little the withholding from your Social Security Medicare taxes. Wants to spend $60 billion on education. Part of that is rehabbing old schools, but the majority of that is to send to the states so they can continue to hire educators at state and local level. Infrastructure spending, about $50 billion. Infrastructure is a great way to boost the economy, but it's long term. It just doesn't happen overnight because just like in your exploration, your drilling, the permits and the approvals to go forward stretches 3-year projects into 7-year projects. That's why you're just starting to see some of those shovel-ready projects 2 years ago actually start right now. So infrastructure is helpful, but it's slow. HUD spending, urban development and housing spending, extending the unemployment benefits for folks another year. We're already 2 years. Put it at 3 years, and then miscellaneous spending. So total deficit increase about $447 billion. That's a little more than half the first stimulus on the second one. The President's proposing to pay for this with a whole raft of new tax increases. I know we often hear on the campaign trail about millionaires and billionaires, but the tax increases actually hit a lot of other people. And some of you in this room, families making $250,000 a year. A lot of those in our area are professionals and small business people. About half of all the revenue in there are small businesses who file not as a corporation but as an individual taxpayer. So they get hit the hardest in the tax reform. Charitable giving tax and limiting home mortgage deduction on people in that same pro-growth tax bracket is a big part of it. double taxation of U.S. local companies, that's you. Right now, we have one of the worst tax codes in the world, and we double tax our companies that are competing overseas. We're one of the few major economies that still do that. And so to try to offset that a little, be more competitive, we have certain parts of our tax code to offset that double taxation. The president wants to eliminate that. So our companies are going to be at a pretty big disadvantage around the world when you compete. Repealing LIFO accounting seems like an accounting issue, but in fact, for a number of businesses, in the way they capitalize, this is a big problem. Taxing U.S. energy companies like yours, $41 billion. These are tax provisions. These aren't corporate loopholes and subsidies. Uncle Sam does not write a check to Noble Energy or any other company. These are parts of the tax code that have been in place since 1913. And they're tailored for this industry, just like the tax code is tailored for other unique industries in order to allow them to prosper. And the impact of this taxes on U.S. energy companies from a job standpoint is between 300,000 and 500,000 U.S. jobs that we lose. Here's a good example of one of those provisions. A few years ago, 2004, 2005, worried about the number of companies that were out offshoring. We changed the tax code. We basically said, look, if you invest in America, manufacture in America, produce in America, we'll give you a lower tax rate than if you do those things overseas. Makes sense. Encourage those investments here in America. They want to single out one industry, energy, and say, but not for you. We're going to tax your local and U.S. investments in production and jobs as if you're doing the same thing overseas. Makes absolutely no sense this economy would do that, but it's a key provision of the President's bill. Reinstate Superfund, tax local real estate partnerships, and some other matters, but $1.5 trillion of total tax increases, which nearly, not all, but nearly every economist I've met with says it's the wrong solution going forward. I want to, this was that study we did about our global competitors. When they spent less, when they owed less, their economy took off. I want to finish with 2 slides. I asked my joint committee economists to go back. I said, why don't you track federal spending here to job creation along Main Street? Not in government, but along Main Street. And here you can tell the blue line is Uncle Sam's spending, red line is your jobs. And as you can tell, not only is there no relationship, it's a negative relationship. As that government grows, your jobs shrink. Watch what though. I then asked them to go back and say, track business investment. When a business invests in capital, equipment, software, buildings, what happens? We create business investment. It's nearly 1-to-1. And when they do that, companies do that, jobs grow. Your type of jobs grow. And so one of the things we've got going on right now in our economy is that investment isn't being made. Government's spending a lot of money, but private sector job creators are not. Noble is, thankfully, making those types of investments. We're seeing job growth, but that's not the case around the country. So until we get back to the certainty that allows companies like yours in a broader sense to make those investments, we just won't see this economy growing. So that was my Reader's Digest version of what's going on in Washington. Chuck, with your permission, can I stop and take some questions or comments? That be okay? Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
On the energy industry, you mentioned it continues to come up with CB cost savings in Washington for increased taxes. And as we all know, the U.S. energy industry is expanding and growing a lot of jobs. How do we get in this situation where energy systems
The question is, how did we get in a position where industry is now the favorite target for whipping boy? You are. Let me just tell you, again, much as we work in ways and means on energy issues, I have never seen the last 4 years really, never seen an attack quite this strong before. It's because because it's politically easy to bash big oil. That's who you are. I don't know if you knew that. You are. I mean, you're evil in some way for producing oil and natural traditional fuels. And now there's sort of this, there's good fuels and there are bad fuels. And you have to be very bad. So it's a fatal whipping boy because politically it's very popular. And when your own country has such bad policies that we really leave the determination of price elsewhere, and it goes up, it's just easy, Chuck, to hit big oil. And right now in this super committee, they are very quiet about what they're doing, but I guarantee you half of those 12 members wake up every day convinced that they're going to get higher taxes on you because it's politically popular. And I'm not exaggerating. It is a fight we've got going on full scale right now and have had with the moratorium and versions before that, with all this. So it's just politically popular. One of our frustrations is members of Congress vote against energy developments, and they think they'll lose no jobs. It has no impact back home. But your supply chain, your suppliers, your footprint across this country is bigger than most lawmakers imagine. And so part of our challenge has been educating lawmakers that energy matters. You'll see a map of where manufacturing occurs in America. From other states, they'll look at Texas, they'll look at the Gulf Coast, and go, is that textiles? They'll think we're making jeans and sewing, shirts. And we'll say, no, that's energy manufacturing. That's our base along the Gulf Coast. So there's just a huge gap, sir, between reality and the vote. Sorry, that was a long answer to a short question, but that's it. Sir.
What are your Patriots, Democrat board? Came up with a Wall Street Journal article this morning.
Former House member.
Okay, former House.
Harold, yes, sir.
Harold, have you read that article?
I saw the headline this morning, but I didn't get a chance to read. What did he talk about?
Well, he talked about energy is a place where we should be increasing, can increase jobs instantly. And I mean, there's a apparently pretty liberal guy making those statements.
Yeah.
Are we gonna, is there any kind of sympathy at all or is he just being out there?
Harold, when he was in Congress, he came with me as a freshman, was considered moderate Democrat in Tennessee, and so he's right. We leave in energy, we leave about 1 million U.S. jobs on the table and about $7 to $8 billion a year in new revenues from it, simply by not letting them go back to work fully, having full access. So this is our energy argument is if you want more tax revenues from the energy industry, put them back to work fully. Give them full access to this. This is where create jobs and you help address the deficit. So I'd like to see more lawmakers adopt this approach. I'll leave it for when I can talk. Wait and say is on the line. Yes, sir.
First, I applaud you on the balance budget, and I think it's way overdue. 100%. Look at Social Security in that factor, that pie is $701 billion and growing.
Yeah, and growing.
Vision fixing that.
There's two ways we can fix Social Security. I mentioned it. One's mild and one's spicy. The mild one is that if you stick with the pay-as-you-go system, where we pay for our parents and grandparents and younger people will pay for it, if you stay with that approach, because that's the most comfortable people are used to it, then we have to do two things. We have to, over the next 35 years, gradually raise the age to 70. Over a long period of time, raise that to 70 years old. And we have to tie their benefits, not to wage increases, but to cost of living, active cost of living. If you do those two things, you virtually made Social Security sustainable forever. It just doesn't change. And you have to do that because what was once 42 workers for every retiree is now 3 workers for every retiree. In a few years, we go down to there's 2 workers for every one of us on Social Security. That's good if you get to pick your 2 workers. Like I get Warren Buffett, you get Donald Trump. I mean, that'll all work, but the numbers on page you go get harder. So you've got to raise those ages over time. You got to tie the benefits to cost of living. That's probably what will happen. The bolder side is to look at how we give people more control over their retirement and how you make that money work for them. Because right now, your money has no return on investment. It's just Social Security, you might as well bury a coffee can in the back of your do you even have coffee cans anymore? In the back of your backyard. But there's models all around us. And one of them is Galveston. In the mid-1980s, their county employees in Galveston and 2 other counties, they voted to take themselves out of Social Security. And they voted to put their contributions, they kept them the same as for Social Security, and they put them in safe interest-bearing accounts, CDs, and the safest things are. Well, their Social Security benefits for those 3 counties is about 2.5 times higher than what you and I receive. They actually own those accounts. It's theirs. They can give them to their heirs. And it's because they took their contributions, put them into interest-bearing accounts, and the money worked for them. And I think we ought to look at it. I'm supportive of those type of approaches because right now, you have a virtual Social Security account with virtual assets. If it's there, you got to hope the government's got some money to pay. That's just the way it is. I want to see the day where you have a real account with real assets that are yours, that literally are yours. And I'd love to see you turn 67 or 68 or whatever it is, or young people when they turn 70, rather than come to Washington for their retirement benefits, I'd love to see them take their plan to their financial advisor for their retirement benefits. I just think that's an option you ought to look at. What do you think? What do you suggest?
I think your idea of extending the age makes sense. What do you think about ability to pay?
My guess is at the end of the day we're going to meet 6 parts of Social Security. We're already doing Medicare today. We're going to have to make Medicare solved, and my guess at the end of the day is some of that in Social Security. Where I draw the line is going to be some taxes on a system that is unsustainable, and they won't. Washington won't make hard choices to make it sustainable. They aren't even that hard. Then why do we ask people to pay?
But need to pay.
Then
You would just not get Social Security, or do you just tax them?
No, my guess is you would get a portion of Social Security or without cost of living increases or whatever.
How do you do that with pay?
Well, we already do that for the Medicare Prescription Drug Program. Basically, you pay more for that Part D premium when you're at a certain income level than others.
So there'd be a premium that you're talking about with Medicare, and that would be higher for some folks.
We take very good care of low income, middle class families, those with pretty high income streams. And I wish there was a different answer, but if we're going to make this all investments, that makes sense. Yes, sir.
Congressman, I don't disagree with anything that you've shown us. I wonder whether the conclusions that one would come to might be different if you framed these somewhat different. For example, looking at this pie diagram, the defense spending, I agree totally with you that your primary responsibility should be looking after the defense. What I wonder is how that pie diagram would look if it were placed in the context of the entire world's spending on defense, and what that section of the pie for the U.S. would look like. Whether that would change our perception of how much we want to spend on defense. Another example would be the Medicaid expenses are growing at an enormous rate. No doubt about that. But if you put that in the context of what U.S. citizens are paying in the total medical system, not just government spending, but also private spending, we're still faced with the problem of the economy as a whole is putting, is projected to put a lot of money into our own health care. And what I don't have a handle on is when you make a proposal to shift from government spent money in medical programs into private care, what does it look like then? Does it really make that much of a difference?
Two good points. One, Pentagon wastes money. I mean, it does. And we need to have real efficiencies. In fact, I've introduced a bill to force them to be about 15% more efficient in their purchases. And here's why. If this actually pie chart is a good example of the defense pie chart. In fact, if you looked at defense, this would be funding for soldiers in support of soldiers. So if you just leave, and I have my little brother is a command sergeant commander in the Army, runs the hospital corpus in El Paso. You completely leave our troops and the support for their missions alone. But the rest of that pie chart is procurement. It's what the Defense Department buys. Everything from uniforms to these heavy weapon systems and on. And they waste too much money in that area. We got a room full of reports saying how much money we waste. So I'm not against forcing the Pentagon to be much more efficient in their spending. So I think we can, frankly, either shrink this or get a better bang for the buck than they have today. That shouldn't be off limits in my opinion. And I'm as pro-defense as they come. They got to use their money. The other thing on health care, we spend far more as families and businesses for our health care than other countries do in a major way. And we, on health care, if you talk local doctors here, Greens Point area, or up in South Montgomery County, with the Texas Medical Center, they'll tell you we don't need more money in the system. It's how we spend it that's the problem. And so I still think the President's health care plan is not the right solution for that because the incentives are all right. The incentive, basically, the basis of it is everyone in America has to have government-approved health care or pay a fine. Everyone's got to do that. But here's the fine. For companies like a Noble, if you're offering health care today, but it's not government approved, you pay a fine of $3,000 a work. But if you just don't offer it at all and just send your workers into the exchanges, you pay a fine of $2,000 a work. Think about it. You're trying to offer the health care, but it doesn't meet the exact definition. You pay more than if you just send your workers to the exchanges and go away. That's an incentive to drop health care. I'm very worried that's what's going to happen after 2014. And a lot of companies right now are running the numbers, decide where they're going to be, both financially and competitively with that. Another incentive is everyone has to buy government-approved health care, including individuals. But the fine is so small, I'm worried that what has happened in Massachusetts will happen here, which is people in Massachusetts wait until they're sick, and then they buy their health care. Because everyone has to sell it. So, on average, a health care plan in Massachusetts, a new one, is only held for 5 months. So, people buy the health care when they're sick, and they drop it when they feel better. Well, guess what that does? That drives the cost up, and everyone else's premium goes up with it. So, I think we've got to find a much better way to deliver health care in America. And we're spending an awful lot to deliver it the way we do today. We have more access, more choices. We've got to change.
We had decades in which the private sector had a chance to change it, and it didn't seem to work. We got more and more health insurance company involvement that seems to have done something, again, wrong incentives, fee for service.
The only thing I disagree with you on that point is that, frankly, government has driven most of healthcare costs because of Medicare, Medicaid, and most of insurance is mirrors that, ties off of that. And frankly, there's even restrictions on how much business can example, on wellness, preventative, there's only so much that businesses can sort of rebate back to their workers, even when you all work together to lower your health care costs. We actually limit what companies can do to incentivize that. So government, I think, my study has been, I think, far too much of a driver in this whole system.
I'm not advocating greater government involvement. I'm just pointing out that something is wrong when the private sector is not able to put in the right incentives either. And what's the fundamental cause of that?
Yes, sir.
So why wouldn't a budget, balanced budget amendment force tax increases? Because obviously it's easier for companies to raise taxes.
This is the question: is why wouldn't a balanced budget be force increase taxes? It could. In fact, many states have a balanced budget agreement or balanced budget through their constitutions, and the way they get around it, they get to it, is to raise taxes. You see that in the Northeast, some of the California, you see some of the high tax states. That's what they use. I think the answer is either a balanced budget with the tax limitation measure in it, but that's harder to pass, or you elect members of Congress who are going to choose the other path, that you actually cut spending a little bit. No, that's a fair concern. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, then we'll come to you, Fred.
Can you address just overall willingness to discuss tax reform and the likelihood? I mean, is the super committee, are we going to reform our tax code anytime soon to make it simpler?
Yeah, I'm hopeful that we can scoop that up. Question is, are we going to reform our tax code anytime soon? And the answer is, I hope sooner rather than later. But it's going to take some adults sitting at the table to do it. Our tax code for business, for your companies, we used to be, our tax code was 9 percentage points more competitive than the rest of the world, our competitors. Now we're at a severe disadvantage in R&D, taxes, and double taxation global system. So we've got to become more competitive there. On the individual side, our tax code is scary. The complexity of it is frightening. I mean, it's a drag on, I think, businesses and I think a worry for families. I'm just convinced that we could lower, if we did away with a lot of the deductions, exemptions, sort of the spending we do through the tax code. If you're up, we could do away with a lot of the complexity and lower that overall rate quite a bit. But we've got to figure out, which is what in Ways and Means Committee, that's what we're proposing to do, lower tax rates for everyone on the individual side, but probably do away with some of those exemptions, to go with it, the complexity of the code. Same on the business side. I don't think the super committee is the right place to do reform. It's too soon. They're not how to do it. My guess is they're going to make big mistakes. It'll take a long time to fix. Ways and Means Committee here in the next few weeks are going to unveil the first step toward business tax reform to make us more competitive. We'll follow up with some ideas on family tax reform and gathering input from people. So we may be asking for another town hall meeting on the tax code and what you guys want to do. I'll tell you, I still would love, speaking of mild and spicy, I still would like us to take a hard look at replacing the income tax, taxing capital investment, hard work, with taxing consumption. I still would love to see us look at hard at a retail sales tax. We tax everything one time, the first time it goes across that supermarket, the register, and not again, because I think it's more efficient. I think it's fair. There's fewer loopholes. Washington would have to give up a lot of power. I'd love to see us look at that. Yes, I'm afraid you had your hand up.
Congressman Brady, I see America's dependence on foreign oil as a big threat to our security and our economy. We did hear a lot about trying to become more energy independent in the past, but then they handcuffed us in the Gulf of Mexico. They're going to tax us more. Is there, has the issue of trying to be less dependent on foreign oil gone to sleep in Washington?
No, it's not gone to sleep. It's all focused on the way you do that is through renewables. You know, by driving the price of traditional oil and gas up and driving people into renewables is right now their answer to how we become more energy independent. And there is a big role for renewables over time. It's not anywhere close. In the next 3 decades, traditional energy is where we're going to drive this economy. And so it seems to me oil and natural gas is that natural bridge, economic bridge to get to that point. And so until we stop putting all our baskets on the renewable side and realize we just need a balanced approach, I think we're going to continue to be more energy dependent. What do you think?
I don't see us getting off the foreign oil very soon. OPEC, many members of which are not very friendly to America, all of a sudden double or triple the price of oil is going to hurt.
What we really desperately need is a second affordable transportation fuel. That's our biggest weakness in American energy. We have some electricity, we have some few more diverse sources, but we're really just oil, diesel for fuel. I would love to see us convert our major fleets to natural gas. You know, 80% of those trucks we see on the road aren't doing long haul. They go back at night, the exact same place they started that morning. You know, putting in place the natural gas engines, you know, returning back to the fleet barn and being refueled natural gas there. We can, of all the solutions I've seen, a 5-year focus on doing that could have a dramatic impact on lessening our dependence. But we've got to have that second transportation fuel. People can debate what that ought to be. It seems to be natural gas, just screaming out that it's the one to do it. It's abundant, affordable, it's clean. I think we can do it. And the market, I think, is right at the tipping point. With a little boost, we could have some big impact. Yes, ma'am.
I think there's time for one more.
One more. Sorry. Yes, ma'am.
My question is, where on your pie chart does the congressional and executive branch salaries show? And would anybody entertain in those 2 branches, and the judicial branch, of taking a 10% pay cut to give a boost to the economy, as well as give an incentive to other companies? You know, we're going to do this so we can put people back to work.
It's in the green pie chart. My wife's not a big fan of that recommendation. And we've sort of taken a different approach. We've cut our budgets back by, it'll be about 11% as a start. And I go beyond that. We've been in office, this is my 8th term. On average, in our office, we spend 80% of our budget. We give 20% of it back on average every year. And my thinking is, one, it is your dollars, not mine. We have very frugal staff. They know whose dollars it is. More importantly, when agencies come to me and say, I've got to have more money, I can tell them, look, we live on less than what we've been given, and you can live. We do without a lot of things to get to that point. And so maybe salaries would make that difference, but I think in that big budget, if you forced every agency to become that much more efficient, as this company has, and my guess is in your family you have, then I think we can solve the problem there as well. Can I make a suggestion? We've got a lot of ways, because I don't know the answers. We do telephone town hall meetings to gather input. I'm on Facebook. We have an e-newsletter. We invite you to come to that, sign up. We can update you, and also you can give feedback. We do a lot of town hall meetings, and so our webpage has that as well. And then I'll finish with this story, because it really has to do with this budget. Have you ever heard of the Texas Honor Flag? You know, where they take the World War II veterans up to Washington to see that memorial, that's dedicated to them. Well, the Texas Honor Flight was created in Montgomery, Texas. This a high school teacher, Brenda Beaton, decided we needed to take those veterans up there. 1,000 or more were dying every day. So she started with their students and then the community, and they raised money to take these veterans up to honor them. They've done 5 of these flights. They're amazing. They leave the Conroe parking lot, the Target parking lot in Conroe. They gather at 4 o'clock in the morning. These buses do. And every veteran has an escort with them. Younger person taken that day is a long day. The community's there to send them off. The Patriot Guard motorcycle riders take them down the bush. They fly to Washington. They go to the monument in their honor. Lay a wreath at the Texas column. They see a couple other monuments. They return home that very same day. It is a long day. They don't get home until about 2 in the morning. On every flight, same thing happens. All those young escorts on the flight back, all the veterans chattering away, talking. They tell us it's one of the best days of their life. On every honor flight in the morning, we don't send them off. We meet a hero or more. The last fit in front of the flight, these 2 women came up and said, "Can you meet our dad? We think he's a real hero." I said, "Absolutely." So I met Mr. Billy Trio of Trinity, Texas. Turns out Billy Trio was the youngest serving Marine in World War II. He enlisted when he was 13 years old. I have a son who's turning 13 on Friday. 13 years old. He was in his first battle, Guadalcanal, at 14 years old. Fought 2 more at the Battle of Saipan, was seriously injured, was in the hospital for 8 months. He completed his full tour of duty 2 weeks shy of 17. I went up to Trinity, Texas, got the chance to present that Purple Heart that he had earned in Saipan at the American Legion Hall there, his family, friends, all this. We were just in awe of him. And his approach is, well, I'm not a hero. You know, this is what Americans do. You know, this is how we do it. At the same time I was meeting Billy Trio, I met Sergeant Eddie Wright from Willis. In 2004, his rocket-propelled grenade hit his vehicle, blew both of his arms off, ripped a hole in his left leg. He's bleeding out, still gives help to his colleagues. They all live. He decides, I'm not a victim, and he becomes, even with his arms gone, a hand-to-hand combat instructor in the Marine Corps. He's now out of it. A little while back, we were in a room about the size, the community coming together, build a home for him, for those special needs, a Helping Hero group. It's amazing. And he took the microphone and he said, you know, from time to time, people will ask, you know, if you could just go back to that day, if you could just have everything healthy again and, you know, have your life the way it was, wouldn't that be great? And his answer is absolutely not. I wouldn't take a thing back. He said, the generosity of American people, what I've learned, he said, I now know more about the freedoms I was fighting for than when I was fighting for them. And the reason I talk about Billy Trio and Sergeant Eddie Wright is that if you're looking for the greatness of government of America in its government, you'll always be disappointed. If you're looking for the greatness of America within its people, you'll rarely be disappointed. I really convinced. We need to stop looking there so much for our future and need to be looking at you, companies like you, people like you, communities like ours. I think we've got the real future ahead. I mean, that's what we ought to be putting a bet on as a nation. So I so much appreciate you having me here early on a Monday morning. I'm probably depressed for the week. We got some time before Friday. I think you can work out of it, you know, with the right counseling. So thank you very much for having me here today.
Congressman, that was, no, you haven't depressed us, but you gave us a lot more to think about as we go forward. I was glad to hear your comments on natural gas, because that's something that Noble Energy is betting on and investing on a lot as well, and we share your views that natural gas can do a lot for this country. It's abundant, it's affordable, we just need to find a way to get it into the transportation system. So thanks for spending your time with us. I know you're very busy. Thanks to all of you for
for coming and hearing the views for many of you, your congressmen. So again, thanks for being here. Thanks so much.